Well, good afternoon or greetings or good morning, whatever it is. Happy that you could join me today for Capture's webinar on 4 critical tools to build your app pool. This has been a year unlike any other year. Maybe, hopefully, you all are thinking unlike any other year that we will have in the future. But nonetheless, we're here today to talk about how do we build the app pool early on in order to maintain success for the fall 21 cycle. My name is Jamie Gleason, and I am Capture's Director of Undergraduate Initiatives. It's good to meet you today. You get a double picture of me. I have been in the higher ed space for about 15 years and all different portions of the enrollment cycle, whether it's enrollment, current students, or alumni. I've been at Capture since 2015, and as you can see there, I'm a avid all sorts of thinger, and one of which is I like to give my opinion. So hopefully we'll have a little bit of that today. Today, what we're going to talk about is applications. But before we do that, I think it's appropriate for me to talk a little bit about who Capture is. Capture lives in the space of behavioral intelligence. And you might be asking yourself, what is behavioral intelligence? That's a new phrase. That's a new term in the world that we live in enrollment management. And that's true. It is a new phrase, but it's not an unnew concept. Behavioral intelligence is the collection and use of data to understand and predict. The way that we have understood enrollment behavioral intelligence in the past is largely through predictive modeling. However, what Capture brings to the table is actually a platform that incorporates current behavior along with predictive behavior. And today we're going to talk a little bit about some of those things. We're not going to go into all the parts and pieces, but it is important because I'm going to be talking about the concept throughout the day. So first, let me just give the 90-second overview on what these pieces are. The behavioral intelligence platform that we talk about at Capture consists of 4 primary areas: engage, apply, aid, and enroll. And as you can see, that incorporates the span of the enrollment funnel. Capture uses the behavioral intelligence that we see from users, the predictive modeling insights that we have from previous enrollment cycles, and we apply them to understand what is the most critical interaction that this student needs right now in order to take the next step. Along with that, we also use select solution tools to get us there. We use digital marketing, we use digital advertising, we use email. And then there's a portion of things like print and search and other tools that are out there in the space that we also use a lot. And all of this is brought together by our team of unbelievable professionals who bring this to bear, and some of which who have been actually in the chairs, like folks like you. I used to be a director of admissions at 2 institutions here in the Philadelphia area. My colleagues have been in the graduate space and in advancement, 2 areas in higher ed that we also work. But we're surrounded by subject matter experts in technology and communications and in developing software and things like that. So that's just a little bit about who Capture is. And hopefully, as we go throughout the presentation today, you'll understand a little bit more about why I refer to those things, because they're such critical components of where we are and where we are going. This last week, I had an unbelievable opportunity to talk to a good friend of mine in the enrollment management space, Bob Massa. And Bob and I talked about this big concept of what are we up against? You know, this has been, like I said at the beginning of the webinar, a cycle like we have never experienced in the past. We've experienced things like the limitations of people on campus, and in fact, the limitations of our own staff on campus. We have seen and continue to see how traditional sourcing shortages are impacting the fall 21 cycle. We've also been a part of this kind of massive overexposure to marketing materials that this current group of students is facing and will continue to face, along with parental fear and a general feel, and I would say general when it comes to both students and professionals and enrollment offices and institutions. There's an uncertainty and an investment uncertainty about where we're headed. So in the context of that backdrop, I had the opportunity to interview Bob and ask him a few questions about making his app pool. What would he do if he were in this situation? So we're going to take a couple minutes and listen to what Bob and I talked about, and then we'll follow that up with the 4 critical tools. So Bob, thanks for taking a few minutes today on a Friday, nonetheless, to talk about the state of higher ed. And this has certainly been an interesting number of months. I think we have an interesting number of months to go, but I would love to hear your perspective on that. And really what I'm thinking is, in your opinion, what are some of these bigger issues that are facing enrollment offices now? And maybe let's take 4 months at a time or something during the kind of application season we're looking at.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks, Jamie, for asking me to opine on these issues. It's it's one thing being right in the middle and the thick of things. It's another being retired, as I am, for the last year and several months, and being able to look at the big picture with partial immunity, anyway. So, a huge issue really is developing the pipeline, right? I mean, with fewer students taking the SATs and the ACTs, and with student search programs dependent on purchasing names primarily from the testing agencies, some colleges, of course, are going to be challenged to generate enough applications to get their classes. But I think an even larger issue looms, and that's the perception on the part of parents and students that the value of a particular college or university has diminished. Now, this may not be true for the wealthiest and the best known schools, but
sure.
90 to 95% of the 4-year nonprofit, private and public institutions out there, students see budget deficits, they read about layoffs, they see cuts in programs, they see institutions wavering between in-person and remote, and they begin to wonder if they may just not be better either not going to college at all or attending either a community college or a regional public close to home. And of course, we know that community college enrollments have tanked this fall. So it doesn't seem that they're attending community college. I think overall, and you've probably read, enrollment in undergraduate enrollment nationwide is now 2.5%, almost 4% in public institutions. I'm sorry, in private institutions. Public institutions are much less, which makes sense because they're closer to home and they're less expensive. So colleges need to do some proactive marketing. That strategic belt tightening is actually good for long-term sustainability and growth, and they need to promote the heck out of their outcomes, both jobs and graduate schools. So there are plenty of other issues, but those are the 2 big ones I see: developing the pipeline and being able to demonstrate continued value.
Yeah, I mean, that is a very wise perception, because I do think there's this, as a parent myself, there's a lot of these, before it was a values argument that we always had to make, and now it's a values overcoming fear argument that's like become even more intensified in the current environment.
Absolutely.
You said something about, the marketing, the perception of being proactive in your marketing is a very big reality. And we've all heard, and personally probably experienced, or maybe I have as a retiree, maybe you have not, so congratulations. But the concept of Zoom fatigue. And as I think about, high school seniors and juniors sitting in front of their computers, in my area in Pennsylvania all day, because they're not in person, like, what is going to be the impact on that in this, I'm calling it a hyper digital, like digital overexposure age? What's going to be that impact on high school seniors as we think about recruitment in general?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me just correct the perception. I may be retired from campus, And if we have time, I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm doing later. But I totally understand Zoom fatigue or online video fatigue. But to paraphrase Abe Lincoln's famous quote about happiness, I'd say students are just about as tired of Zoom as they make their mind up to be.
Yeah.
Right. It's reality. And right now, it's the only way, or a major way, let me put it that way, to get to know colleges and its people. So students really want to find out about a specific college, if that college is right for them. They're going to need to engage digitally, especially with a live person, current student, faculty member, or staff member. However, I do think that students are more stressed this year, particularly high school students who are embarking on their college search. As COVID makes it feel as though they have even less control over the college admissions process than they have had in the past. Also, with regard to everything digital, I worry about economically disadvantaged students.
Yeah.
Who aren't going to have 24/7 access to the internet. So it just, again, it's reality. I don't want to be cavalier about it and say, suck it up, this is what you have to do.
Sure.
But on the other hand, we can get tired of the same routine day in and day out in a non-COVID environment.
Sure.
Get up, go to class, do your homework, do your activities. At least you have, human interaction, which is less so this way. But I do have to say that I get around more by being able to interact online. So if you and I didn't have this, I'm not going to drive up to Pennsylvania to talk with you, or you're not going to come down to Maryland to talk with me, probably. So we'd miss this opportunity. So there are some good things about it, but I totally understand the fatigue aspect. But I think students just don't have a choice right now. I mean, they've got to do it if they're going to be interested in finding the right college match.
So let's just play pretend for a little while. And let's pretend that I am on a phone call with you, a seasoned veteran in enrollment management, and I'm, say, a first or second year director of admissions who maybe hasn't been through a quote unquote normal cycle. What would be maybe a couple pieces of advice that you would say are absolute must-dos? And obviously there's a huge number of variables here relative to institution type and size and all that kind of stuff, but let's just go with whatever you think. But 2 or 3 things that are absolutely non-negotiables that you would give for advice.
Yeah, well, the first is, do you really want to be a VP for enrollment and director of admissions? Have you considered selling electric cars in California instead? But seriously, the best advice I could give to a new dean or vice president this year is to be a very good listener. Your staff is nervous. Hear them out. Do what you can to demonstrate your resolve to do your best for the college and to help them do theirs. And I would say the same with students and their parents. Be transparent. Make sure they know you're there for them. Anticipate their need to know how the college is handling the pandemic. Sure. And how it's integrating online instruction into its in-person classrooms. I'd exude confidence when you're dealing with parents and students, but acknowledge challenge. Mm-hmm. And always chant your outcomes, and challenge your partners. For example, financial aid modeling depends on fairly similar environment from year to year. That. This year, chaos seems to rule. So talk with your partners about how they can help you make the most accurate prediction possible. Make friends with key faculty members. That's another one.
Sure.
And always keep your president and provost informed so that there are no surprises. Finally, I would urge my colleagues, both new and old, to consider increasing the numbers you admit under early decision. That's kind of in the weeds. But while we, can't any longer require or enforce the practice of withdrawing all your applications once committing to an ED school. We'll still have a very high yield on this group.
Sure.
And likely a low melt rate. So, you'll have the room and the quality to admit more under ED. So you really need to, to think about pulling that lever. And I totally get the fact that early decision, that underrepresented students, that economically disadvantaged students are underrepresented in early decision. I understand that. But for the next couple of years, I think it's important for colleges to hone in on students who want them and to build their enrollment that way. And, guidance counselors, college counselors probably aren't going to like to hear that, but the survival of the institution depends on it, so long as you're above board with students and their parents, and you're trying to accomplish what's best for them rather than trying to get them to enroll at any cost.
Yeah, that's I love what you said there, of that point of exuding confidence, but also acknowledge the challenges that are there. This is a uncharted territory for sure, and certainly gives all of us on the industry side a lot to think about every evening about how it's going to play out. And with the numerous variables that are out there, it's very much a brave new world, if we will. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now? What's retirement look like for Bob Massa?
Well, I keep busy. Certainly, I do some volunteer work. So I chair the board of the Character Collaborative, which is a group of about 75 colleges and schools that are interested in helping institutions include attributes of character in the admissions process, in the admissions evaluation process, both performance-based character like resiliency,
Sure.
and ethical character like honesty.
Mm-hmm.
I serve on the board of a small pre-K through 8 school in New Jersey. I'm doing some teaching for the University of Southern California. I teach a course in their master's program on higher ed marketing. And Bill Conley, who is the VP for enrollment, just retired at Bucknell, and I started a new company in June called Enrollment Intelligence Now. And the two of us are the principals, and we work with institutions to help new VPs, actually, and deans make their way through their first year, basically as a mentor and a coach. We do some other work with institutions, but that's our main our main service, if you will. So keeping busy, and of course, having moved, setting up a new house, being closer to our children down here in Maryland. So it's it's never a dull moment, Jamie.
Never a dull moment. That's exactly what I was thinking. Well, Bob, thanks so much for your time today, and I wish you the best in new endeavors. And what we'll do is make sure that we get your a link to your company up on our website as a result of, not on our website, sorry, with this podcast, and we'll go out from there. So thanks again, and enjoy your weekend coming up.
All right. Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks,
Okay.
Bob. So I would be remiss to say thank you again to Bob Massa for taking the time to be with me and talk about those critical factors in the enrollment pipeline. We're currently facing in the season of not only search, but the heavy points of application. This is the time in the cycle, typically from early September or even late August through to mid-November, where applications come in. They come pouring into institutions, and we have become accustomed to that. We rely on that. Our presidents who come and ask us how things are going are used to us saying, yes, here's where we are. Here's the level of interest that we're seeing. Here's the demand that's being shown. And what we're up against in the current market is something, the first point of what we're going to talk about today is search sourcing. And what is happening? Oh my word, what is happening? It's been about 5 months, 6 months since the kind of the heat of the pandemic, the first cancellations of the ACT and SAT. And that has created not only a tremendous pause for many institutions, but a tremendous backlog for students. What are we going to do is the big question of like, I had a partner come to us and they said, we're 70% down in inquiries year over year. What are we going to do? And it's largely associated to the fact that sourcing from search has not been there. And this, not to be like the bearer of bad news, but at Capture, we don't see this. This is not going to go away anytime soon. So what this leads to on the practitioner level is this question of what do we do? How do we overcome this? And what practices should we be implementing? If you haven't asked yourself these questions yet, if you're kind of sitting there waiting for the the search schedule to become back on track from SAT and the College Board, my advice to you would be don't wait any longer. It's time to diversify. As I like to say to my kids, like any good 401k, diversification is probably the key. As any good retirement platform or portfolio, I should say, diversification is the key. And it's time to think about search source diversity. We've all seen that the numbers are down. The numbers are going to continue to be down, which then must lead us to what are some other sources that we need to be using? How do I help diversify not only the sources that we're using, but also some of the structures that I've had in place? Capture is no stranger to this. We have our partners are tremendous users of search because we can make effective use of it. And diversifying that doesn't take away from its effectiveness. Now, I do need to put a big warning on there is that the individual results of every campaign and every source and every geography and every fill in the blank that you want to do, they're going to differ by institution. But the reassuring part here is that there are still leads available. For instance, one of the organizations that Capture partners with is named Plexus, which you may have heard of. And Plexus, we entered into a relationship with Plexus in order to meet some of the needs of our partners. And the first question that we got was, well, what's it going to look like in terms of results? Which is a great question to ask, and a question that we were asking. Here are some of the results that you might see. The truth is, when you diversify, there is some risk. There is some potential for duplicity. One of the deals that we worked out with this organization in particular is that we can dedupe their records at no charge to our partners. But if you look right there at the inquiry to the lead to inquiry conversion of about 10%, just a little under 10%, that is an incredible response that we needed to bring to bear for our partners who are using this source. Now, this is a 4-week-old study. It's pretty fresh. So there's not been a lot of communications. But overall, we're seeing a win here in terms of the diversity. And that diversity goes, among different organizations, and there are different sources to be leaned on. So the truth is, what we want to emphasize is that behavioral intelligence, watching search sources using behavioral intelligence leads to better results. And who doesn't want better results, right? Better results are where it's at. So you might be asking, well, how do I get better results? How does it lead to better results? In short, and I could go probably for a long time talking about the details of this, but in short, what behavioral intelligence does is it allows us to hyper-target the purchases. So if there's a group that's within your state, or if you're looking at an out-of-state population, and let's just say you're in California or in New York, where there's a high potential, a high population rate, behavioral intelligence allows us to hyper-focus pre-purchase to understand, hey, what students are going to best perform or best apply at your campus? And that's based on historical analysis of your results, but also it looks at current behavior of students once they're into that funnel. So we continue to hone down through. This leads to great results, but on top of that, it also leads to a better buy. You ultimately will have the ability to spend less and buy less, which then creates a more narrow focused field of vision for your counselors and for you, whether it's in your Marcom efforts to go after. So there's a smaller slice of people. Behavioral intelligence bring results, and that is something that's formidable and something to key into. So you might think, okay, well, how do you do that? Well, there's a lot to be said. Our statisticians will tell you a lot about how that is actually done through algorithms and different characteristics and features that are sewn into the process. But the key is that we look at the top percentages of students who are saying, our predictive models are saying, hey, these are the top groups. These are the ones to buy. And if you see here, the results are astoundingly obvious that as we look across our partners to the completed app rate, we see a rate of 6 times the likelihood to apply and complete an application when we purchase the top 5% of records. And we do that through behavioral intelligence. So search sourcing diversity is critical, is one of the critical things that you should be doing. But along with that, the use of predictive analytics is equally as important. And as I said before, and as Bob mentioned this in our interview, predictive models are historically most correct when the data that they're using is consistent. And our statisticians here, our data science team at Capture will reiterate this all day long. We want to make sure that we have good data so that way we can have good analytics and good outcomes. Well, this year it's kind of weird, right? The students who are in, let's say, the high school senior population right now, they have a limited ability to get on campus. They have this super unbelievable exposure online, which ultimately is going to lead to higher web traffic on your website. That's a good thing. You know, we want to have more students, more potential buyers on your website looking at what you have to offer. That is a good problem to have. That is a benefit of the context that we are currently in. We also, as a result of that, can see that this can be a top of the lift funnel. You could potentially have more web inquiries, more students raising their hand in the request for information, which ultimately leads to a bigger inquiry pool, or an inquiry pool that is equally as large. On the downside, it also could lead to, that bigger inquiry pool could also lead to a less precise use of resources. Say you're an institution that likes to print a view book or a direct mail piece and send that to your entire inquiry population. Having 5% more inquiries to send that to is a big strain on your budget. It's a big strain on the resources that you have. And I also say here, it's a big strain on sanity. As I used to manage counselors and those who are on the front lines talking with students, having a big pool is a double-edged sword in that it's really great to have a lot of people to work and talk through and communicate with, but it also can be very overwhelming when it comes to building the application pool. So predictive analytics is our ability to see what these students are doing. So let's say to watch their web behavior, to see where they're clicking around, and then take those strings of clicks and the behavior that they're displaying and put it together into an intelligible analytic, a prediction that makes sense and that's very usable. You might be saying to yourself right now, Jamie, you lost me about 5 minutes ago. And I would not be surprised if you said that, because this is an area that is new. It's an area of marketing that's different. This is not the way it's normally been done. So let me give you a little bit of a picture of what this looks like. Here, this is a dashboard of the Behavioral Intelligence Engage platform. You can see here that I picked out a demo record. This is not a real student. This is a fake student. But you can see here where they are in the funnel. They're at suspect level, which is how Capture quantifies the very top. So someone, let's say they're an ACT lead or a SAT lead, they would come in as a suspect. But you see there are two scores called the CES and the CAI. These are, I'm not going to go into the details of them, but they're two predictive analytics scores that basically measure two different things. CES is a 7-day measurement of that student's activity on the website. CAI is a lifetime measurement. And as you can see next to it, even though they're not circled, this student has visited 78 pages on 13 separate visits, and yet they're still considered a suspect. They're still considered at the very top of the funnel. Now, if you're like me, you're thinking, oh, well, that student's not acting like someone who's at the very top of the funnel. They're very interested, but they haven't taken the traditional means of raising their hand. Capture also gives the insight of a detailed visit history, which all of those tabs on the right are expandable to really understand, hey, what are they actually looking at and what are they seeing, so that you can see all the different page views stacked up and understanding like what are the main tags that the student is looking at. These are all types of prediction that, unless the behavioral intelligence platform is a part of your process, you have no insight into. Ultimately, here is the outcome. The outcome on top is the more times you can get a student to engage with your website, the takeaway, the more times you can get a student to engage with your website, the higher the likelihood is for them to complete the application. So you can see those numbers, the infographics on top. Those are tremendous statistics about the ability to get a student coming back to your website 10 or more times. You've got almost a 50% chance of getting that student's completed application. But that process, predictive analytics aren't just helpful at the application level. So let me give for instance, as we see those bottom 3 bullet points, we have the ability to use these analytics, to use those scores in order to strategically direct digital assets and resources toward particular audiences. We can slice these groups down. We can apply the scores to, say, in-state or out-of-state, international or domestic, fill in the blank program, all sorts of different things, regardless of where they are in the funnel. We can also, at the very top of the funnel, leverage the score in order to create an inquiry for someone who hasn't yet raised their hand. So in the case of the student that I showed before, they visited so many pages, they've done so much, they're acting like an inquiry, but they haven't done the traditional hand raising. Then we have the ability to bring that student forward into an inquiry pool and deploy more communication assets to them. And in the yield portion of the funnel, we have the ability to use predictive analytics in order to drive specific initiatives, whether it's a student who wants to study pre-med or someone who's going into engineering. We can drive particular messages from deans or department heads right to that student based on where they have arrived or how much engagement they have into the platform. And again, these are things that only through the behavioral intelligence platform are you able to see and then tangibly, tactically put those into motion with the particular audience that you want to bring to bear. All right, a little agenda check, because I'm always running late. I always go over time. I always have too much in my slide decks to cover in the amount of time that I have. This is a common problem of mine. I should probably list it in my bio. But we're halfway through. We've talked about search sourcing diversity. We've talked about the necessity of predictive analytics. And now let's take on the next 2 points of diversified marketing and then speed to lead. Let me tell you a little story. My wife's birthday is in September. And the other day I had to go to the ATM at our bank, which I rarely go to the bank anymore, mostly because the lines are too long in the drive-through. But I had to go to the ATM, and I didn't want to walk upstairs to get my wallet, so I took her wallet. I took her ATM card and went and used her card at the ATM. Well, her birthday is in September, so when I slid the card through the ATM, or when I put it in a slot, it basically gave me a message that was like this from Wells Fargo, wishing me it was actually happy birthday month. Now, granted, it thought I was my wife, not me, but it made me feel really special, because I thought, wow, Wells Fargo is this massive company, and yet they're paying attention to these little details of personalization, which then led me to think, man, higher ed needs to do more when it comes to personalization, and we need to make sure that we're really integrating that into our processes if we're not already. The top 5 benefits of personalization, you can see right there. They are all good things. Better leads, better conversion rates, better experiences. And overall, this is the kicker. 71% of shoppers or consumers are frustrated when their experience is impersonal. Let that soak in for a second. 71%. Now, this is a 2018 study. And I think that since 2018, we've become even more accustomed to personalization, to this experience that we normally have an expectation for. My charge to you, or my goal in saying this, is that you will take time to really take stock of what have you personalized. What are you using that makes your shopper or your student or your influencer makes them feel like their experience is personal? And I think that sometimes maybe the trap that we face is that sometimes we think this has to be very complicated, and then we have to go into these really high levels of detail when it comes to personalization. And I would just go against that and to say, debunk that. Something as simple as acknowledging where a student is in the pipeline and saying, hey, we like to, we want to offer you this piece of information because you're here. We want to offer you an acceptance message on your platform, a marketing automation a popover or a toaster or something that says, congratulations on your acceptance to ABC institution, or congratulations on your acceptance into this program. It doesn't have to be like a bunch of different data points from your CRM all strung together and synthesized in order to make this very complicated piece of code to read. But even just acknowledging stage in the funnel, next steps, missing pieces, things like that, go a long way in making your customer feel like their experience is personal. But along with personalized, our material should also be diversified. Now, anyone who works at Capture understands that I have, for a long time, have been a proponent of, multi-channel operations, multi-channel integration of marketing. And that is to the point of where I actually still like print. I still think that there's a place for print. I often think of an armory and think of, weapons that are old and things that have been tried and true, so to speak, in the enrollment world. Just because we get a new tool doesn't mean that we have to throw away the old tool, but in fact, it helps to understand how this diversification of tools really work together in order to create an experience that is personal and that is fitting to the customer that you're trying to reach. So in short, I would say, make sure that as you look through your communication, as you audit, that your tools, the things that you're using, are relevant. Email is a great tool. It's very cost effective. You can broadcast a lot. But a lot of times, students have particular mailboxes set up so that they don't have to look at email. So what are the other tools that you're using to help reach the prospects in order to get that message in? And then vice versa, when it comes to influencers, maybe they are more email friendly or email centric. Also, going back to what I said about automation and personalization, don't overcomplicate the strategy. You want the most effective strategy is the one that actually can be done. And we have to recognize that there are people in different places and that this message doesn't have to be complicated in order to be right. And the next thing, and the big thing, always the big thing, is focus on the next step. When it comes to application completion and building the app pool, focusing on what is missing or what needs to be done next and not like 3 steps ahead is really the important part of where we need to be. We need to understand this student is here right now and they need to move from A to B. And we want to make that happen, moving from A to B. We don't need to look out to D, E, and F. It's more about getting them from A to B at this point and building that application pool. Tony Robbins once said, to effectively communicate, we must realize that we are all different in the way we perceive the world, and we need to use this understanding as our guide to communication with others. If I had to add a fourth point here, I would probably say be sympathetic. In this age that we're in, where there's so much uncertainty, as Bob stated in the interview, there's a moment where we can be confident, and yet at the same time, we can be concerned. So be confident and concerned as you're communicating and as you're putting together that communication for this cycle and the next cycle to come. I think I said this in a previous webinar or in the Buzz podcast, but this is a moment where we shouldn't be having the same communication go out as went out last year. this has to be a custom comp flow that we're looking at, iterating upon, and moving forward, because this is such a unique period of time. And to not acknowledge that with our current audience would be a tragedy. Okay, the last one, the 4 points that I think are very critical in this era. The final one is speed to lead measurement. And what do I mean by speed to lead? That's such a like salesy term, and it makes a lot of it kind of has this, for me, like a furniture dealership. How like when you go in there and they're always asking if you need any help. Speed to lead for me is, how do we make sure that we're not stopping the process, that we're moving this forward quickly and relevantly in a way that student is getting the information they need. One of the tools that we give to our partners at Capture is a little report called the Daily Visitor Report. And I've often said to others and the partners that I've worked with before, what would it be like to have the insight to know, hey, what students were on your website last night or this last week, in order to understand, okay, this is what I need to do to move them forward. The Daily Visitor Report actually does just that. It gives you a snapshot of identified visitors that were on your site, and it gives you the ability to say, hey, I'm going to take that group of students, whether it's by territory, whether it's by major, and I'm going to slice them up and give them custom content to answer their questions. Maybe it's get them on a Mongoose text list or a text list for action, or maybe it's just get them a phone call or a note. Something very simple. Capture also believes intensely that automation of communications goes a long way to protect that sanity that I talked about before. So we have built into our platform things like triggered emails and text messages. If you have, there's a little asterisk there, because if you have you need a contract with Mongoose in order to make that work. But territory alerts for your counselors, hot lists, so you can make student calls or direct messaging from social media platforms, or the other custom report options. These are all available in order to shorten that distance and increase that speed to lead measurement. And then finally, when it comes to speed to lead, what's better than having an integration with your CRM? Capture is a silver partner with Slate, and we are currently working on this. And I know for those of you who are out there listening, some of you who have had recent conversations, some of you who have been a part of the current one-way integration that we currently have. Well, I'm telling you, I'm here to confess that we are working on the bi-directional integration that's going to be coming very soon with Slate. And then also I have a roadmap for other CRMs that are prevalent in the marketplace. And along with that, this is maybe stringing together 2 points of diversification of messaging, but also automation. Another way that you can add more speed and texture to your process is to capitalize on some of the other partnerships that we have with third-party vendors. So I already mentioned Mongoose. If you need a virtual platform for events, Conduit and Platform Q has an incredible tool that we're partners with, and all of these tools can help shorten the distance and increase the diversity, ultimately augmenting the application pool that you currently need. So I want to thank you for joining me today. I always go too fast. It's like a problem that I have. I need to learn how to slow down and maybe talk slower and maybe drink less coffee. But in my mind, as we look at the current environment and the atmosphere that we're in, these 4 tools stand out as things that must be done, things that must be leaned on and maximized in order to make better the performance that we have in the marketplace. I hope that you've enjoyed this. I will say, since we don't have an opportunity for questions today, I've given my personal information right there, Jamie Gleason at capturehighered.com, or my phone number. I would be more than happy to discuss any questions that you have, or refer you to someone inside Capture who can help you with the questions that you have. I've also included our contact our contact URL at Capture. We're excited to be able to talk through the situations that you're facing at your institution, or some of the ideas that you have for overcoming some of the app pool shortages. On that note, I'm going to bid you farewell. I'm going to say be safe and We look forward to the next time that we will meet.